So my hope and objective today is to kind of give you some ideas about things that you can try if you haven't tried them already. Maybe try something new. And was probably a couple months ago, somebody here suggested that if anybody wanted to put on a program and talk about ham radio in their life, that they were willing to do that. So that kind of spurred me on to go ahead and put something together here and look back. So give you, first of all, a little bit of history from the early 1950s, some of the equipment that I used, and we're going to give you a little test too to see how much of this equipment you can identify as we go along here. So being a teacher for 14 years, I always have to give a test. So then talk about some of the operating events that I enjoy and that I've had with various people down through the years, some of the modes of operation, and then kind of take a look at what the present conditions are and what I'm up to these days. So it's been a glorious trip, I can say that, and we've seen a lot of things going on. So here's where it all started. My dad, Julian Meyer, in Benson, Minnesota. He was an elementary principal there, taught 6th grade, and was also a mentor to a lot of students in the electronics area, and helped a number of those get ham licenses. So he was a good built-in mentor for me. And he incorporated electronics into his classroom. He started out in about 1930. He built up I think it was a 1 or 2 tube transmitter, probably an old 1A if you remember that tube. And he was on a farm in South Dakota. And his sister lived about 2 miles away. So in those days, they didn't have a lot of receivers around. So he found a receiver, put it in her house, and transmitted from the farmhouse to the other farmhouse. And I remember on him telling me that on Sunday afternoons they'd get together. Dad played violin and saxophone, and his sister played piano, and her husband played violin, and they get a couple guitars, and Sunday afternoon they'd play and transmit music then from one farm over to the other one, and had a lot of fun doing that. When the FCC came into existence in 1934, he put in an application for a license, but for some reason was turned down, and so the broadcasting kind of sat on the back burner. So I remember him giving me a kit that he had put together, which was in a little red box when I was in the 4th grade. And he, anybody remember what fawn stock clips are? That's those little clips you push down and you stick a wire in. This was kind of the building blocks of those days in breadboarding. And so he had breadboarded this in a little red box, gave me the circuit diagram, and showed me how to set it up. And so I wired it up in a little crystal set. And we were in Benson, Minnesota, which is about another 25 miles down the road from Wilmer, if you don't know where that is. And we were able to pick up KWLM out of Wilmer, Minnesota on that little crystal set. And on a good night, we could pick up WCCO in the cities here, too, on it. So remember winding the old coil on the oatmeal box and things like that. And it worked quite well. So that was kind of my start. One of the microphones that he used in the 1930s for his broadcasting was this type. Anybody identify what the principle of operation of that is? Yeah, it's a carbon mic, and has carbon granules in it. And I have that mic here. So we'll pass that around. You can take a look at it. I don't know that the stand is original. It's poured concrete in the stand itself, so it's really heavy. And I think that was, yeah, it did come from my dad's place. I don't know that this is the original one or if he picked it up somewhere along the line, but it was the same type. they use this in the broadcast industry also, that before every program, the engineer would run out with a little rubber hammer, and he'd tap on that microphone to get those granules loosened up in there so that they were good for another go. And we had this wired up to a system and checked it out quite some number of years ago. So at age 15, my ham radio days kind of started. In 1950, my dad says, do you want to study with me to get a ham radio license? I said, sure, that'd be fun. And so we had to overcome that code test. And so the way we learned the Morse code is we had this little house in the lower left here in Benson, Minnesota. They bulldozed it about 2 years ago. But upstairs was my room, and we put one key upstairs. We had this little heating transom in the floor and dropped a wire through that, and then ran it to a code practice oscillator, and we sent code back and forth to each other, and that's the way we learned the Morse code and got us up to 5 words a minute. And we then we're ready to go and take our test. So Benson is about 150 miles west of here, so it was quite a drive just to take the test. But the very first test that was given for the novice license at the Federal Courts building in St. Paul was in 1951 in the summer. So we were there for that very first test. And as a result of that, we both passed, and my dad was issued W0DYD, and mine was DYD. We were consecutive in call. So we had a nice little run of calls going there. Of course, now we need a transmitter and a receiver to set up a station. And so this is the kind of setup. That's a little hard to read up there, but it was first station was a home brew 10-watt one-tube transmitter. And built this up from scratch, and Dad's junk box parts and crystal control, which was necessary for novice license back then, and the license was good for a year. And then you had to upgrade. Also built up the full wave power supply. And this is the radio that was just a conventional shortwave radio, but for operating with CW, you didn't have a beat frequency oscillator. And so my dad says, well, let's do this. Let's build up a little oscillator here, an external oscillator, and we'll run it at 455 kilohertz because that's the IF frequency of the receiver. So now when the signals came in, we had a beat frequency, we could hear it. And that worked out quite well. Not really fine tuning on it, but we could tune it in. And so we were ready to go with the receiver. And then for an antenna, we strung up a 80-meter dipole from the back of our house to the back of the yard, which was about 130 feet. So we had an 80-meter dipole and ready to go for the first contact here. So it was on a Saturday morning, excuse me, and I was listening on the 3.7 to 3750, that was the novice band, and I didn't hear anything, so I said, well, I'm going to call CQ. I called CQ, and lo and behold, just a really strong signal came back to me from the station W0DYD over in Millbank, South Dakota. And we had a nice conversation back and forth, and the hand was trembling, but the message got out there, except for my name, because I later found out that he had copied it as Mary rather than Gary. And so he probably thought he was talking to a young YL someplace around there. So this was my first DX contest, 50 miles across the state line over to Millbank, South Dakota. Over on your right here is Twin Cities. We're out here at Benson, and then Millbank is just over here. So a couple of years ago, I was wondering, well, does W0DB still exist? And so I checked out on QRZ, and the call was still there, but it wasn't Millbank, South Dakota. It was someplace in Nebraska. And so I sent an email to W0DB, and it turns out that it's his grandson that has the call and is living in Nebraska. And so he says, I've got all my grandpa's logs here. And so he looked back in the logs, and he found that entry from W0DYD in Benson, Minnesota. And he sent me a copy of that, and we really appreciated that. So 599 both ways, and we enjoyed that very first contact. Well, the station started growing a little bit about a year later. This is a picture that was actually published in the Swift County Monitor, the local county newspaper, when they did a little article on ham radio. Upper left was my dad, W0DYC. We had advanced off the novice by this time. And a friend of mine, W0FBP, Glenn Kutke, who was a couple of years older than I was. My dad helped him along in getting his ham license as well. So in the little box there that you see in the center is a wooden box. And inside of it was a transmitter that I built up from scratch with 3 6L6s. You had an oscillator, you had a final amplifier, and then you had a 1-tube audio, which used Heising modulation, which is also known as choke modulation, which you modulate the grid of the final amplifier and the screen grid of the final amplifier. And so I used that on 160, 80, and 40 meters, and it had a pi section output tuning on it, so you didn't worry too much about the SWR here, and it was with the tubes they're a little more lenient and forgiving than they are with the semiconductors, of course. And so we tuned it up for the maximum power that we get out. You dip one side of the pi section and then load it up, tune it to the maximum in the other direction. Also, we had upgraded our receiver here. Anybody recognize something like that? That's an S41G Helicrafter receiver. The S38B was probably more popular, the C version. This was kind of think the forerunner of that on the S41G there. And up on here we have a little RF output meter in series with the antenna, so that would give us the maximum tuning as well. Some of the older transmitters too, we tuned up with a little device that I still have, and something called a gimmicks. Anybody seen one of these before? The gimmicks. It's has a dial on here which has the different ham bands indicated, and then you just couple this coil over to the antenna and or the final output amplifier, and then there's a little light here, and the intensity of this light then tells you how much, not how much, but what the maximum power, tuned for maximum brightness. We also used just a fluorescent lamp and held it over by the antenna, and that works pretty nicely too. I'll pass this one around so you can get a little look at it there. This one, this transmitter put out 25 watts with the 6L6 in there. So, and that was an old, I believe, Air Force microphone that we had been using on that one too. So, continued learning. In the Christmas of 1952, my 3 siblings and I always hung up our stockings, and lo and behold, came down on Christmas morning, and there was this 1952 brand new handbook. And I learned a lot out of that. As a matter of fact, I still have it. I had to reinforce it a little bit last night with the little gray tape there. I'll pass it around. You can page through that as you like. Be a little careful with the pages. But that was, there we go. So that time was $3. So you can see the inflation over the years here. Also, there was some continuous learning activity, and ham radio is that way. There's always something new coming out, always something new to learn. And so both Dad and I advanced. Dad went up through the advanced, and then I got the extra classes a few years later. But in high school in '54, I graduated in '54. I had the first class radio telephone, and now that's been eliminated, and now it's just a general class. And then also the second class radio telegraph, which was 20 words per minute on that. So you can see it, I advanced from 5 up to 20 in a couple of years here. And we never used that, except for one exception, is that when I came to take the extra class test, I didn't have to take the 20 word per minute code test. You could just show them your second class telegraph commercial, and that was accepted then as your 20 word requirement. So I didn't have to retake that. A little bit later, probably another year or so, I started doing some more experimenting with transmitters, and it had built up a 80 to 40 CW transmitter in here. I believe that was with an 807, so we're now cranked up to about 50 watts on that one. And we had, I think it was a different one that we had to plug-in. I think we had plug-in coils in this one, so we wound plug-in coils on little 4-pin tube type pins, and then to change bands, you just plugged in the new coil. And one of the times that I remember this, and remember it quite vividly, is that, of course, with tubes, you're talking about a lot of voltage back there. And I think this was probably 400 or 500 volts on the tube, but to change coils, you had to reach in and take the coil off. But it just so happened there was 2 big capacitor pins sitting like this with about 500 volts on it. And as I reached in there, my arm went across it, and I saw this blue arc. I still have a little scar there, as a matter of fact. And I picked myself up off the floor on the other side of the room. I didn't remember what happened in between there, but fortunately, there was no other damage either to me or to the room. And so that taught me something about high voltage. And so went off to college at the North Dakota State School of Science. Is now the SCS, State College of Science in Wapita, North Dakota, for pre-electrical engineering. And took along my little 1-tube transmitter. I don't think this is the exact circuit for it, but it's kind of representative with a crystal and a single tube, and I believe it had a pi section output here instead of this coupled one, and a couple of 2 or 3 crystals for 3.7. What am I going to do for an antenna? Well, I'm in a dormitory, and that's kind of tough. And so I was right by a window, and right by this window just happened to be a metal downspout. And so, maybe we could do something with that. And so what I did was it was just galvanized, it wasn't painted. And I'm not sure about the gutters, if they were probably metal too. So I might have had a pretty good radiator there, but I cleaned it off a little bit, took a big battery clamp and clamped onto that, loaded that up, and away we go. And I could work my dad back in Benson, Minnesota, about 85 miles down the road on 80 CW with that 10 watts and that downspout. And so we had a lot of fun communications back and forth down through the years that I was there. And so it gets back to this with antennas, that whatever you can load up, it probably will get out. It might not be the most efficient way, but you can still have some fun with it, and fun with ham radio. My dad had also upgraded his transmitter and receiver. And anybody recognize this unit up here? What's that? It's a Heathkit. That's it. It's a Heathkit Apache transmitter, 100 watts. And how about the receiver there? You got it, NC300. That one is still in the family. My grandson up in Little Sauk, Minnesota, has his great grandpa's receiver up there, so that's still in operation. So my dad passed away in '97 from Parkinson's, and he had been a ham then for 46 years at that point. My first mobile. Had a 51 Hudson Hornet. Best car I ever owned. I love that car. And to power up, first of all, I built up another transmitter in a little Bud type of box that fit under the dash. 25 watts on AM on 75 meters with four tubes in there. And now we needed some power for that, so under the hood mounted this device here called a dynamotor. Anybody used a dynamotor? Okay, we've got one back here. And you connect it up to your battery. It's like a little motor generator. Connect it up to your battery, and it puts out 400, 500, 600 volts depending on the model that you've got. And so that supplied power then to the plate of the tubes, while the 6 volt or 12 volt system would supply power to the filaments in the tubes. Pardon?
So the dynamotor, is it just like a motor hooked up to a generator to higher voltage?
It's all in one unit. And then for the antenna, I had a center-loaded 75-meter antenna mounted on the back. Now, what do we do for a receiver? Well, we got a car radio in there, but it only tunes AM. And so I built up a little homebrew AM radio converter. So actually it converts your AM, your 75 meters over to AM, and then you tune your AM dial to tune in the stations that you're looking for across the band there. And that worked pretty well. I had a lot of fun with that on 75 meters. So where have we been with all of this? Benson's 50 to 54, Wahpeton 54 to 56. 56 to 59, I went up to the University of North Dakota at Grand Forks in electrical engineering. And up there we had to transmit. I had a job working for KNOX radio as an engineer. And they had a studio which had a small room in there, which got converted into my bedroom for college. And had a transmitter in there as well. And one of the duties of the engineer in those days, they had a directional antenna system, and you had to take readings on the meters, how much power and so forth, about every, I think it was about every hour or something like that, and then hand record them. So that was an FCC requirement. I think a lot of that has been dropped now with a lot of the new automation equipment, of course. From Grand Forks to Bloomington, I was in Bloomington, Minnesota, 60 to 65 over on Girard Avenue. And then I was working in Hopkins at Honeywell. And so I moved out to Minnetonka to be close. And then I think I got laid off there. And then I started working back in Bloomington, so now I had to drive the other direction again. So, but anyway, we were in Minnetonka for 42 years, and we had an acre and a quarter there, so I got spoiled having all that space to put up antennas and wire antennas. Never had a tower, so we didn't really miss that, and I've worked with basically wire antennas. In 2007, our kids told mom and dad, well, this acre and a quarter is getting a little large for mowing, and also about 100-foot driveway to plow there. So we moved into an HOA in Shakopee, and we've been there since 2007. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the operating events. One of my favorites is Field Day. And some of the early field days here we have set up in kind of my own private shack here. My ex-wife's farm, where she grew up, is near Moore, Minnesota. And this is a little summer kitchen they had on the farm. So I set up in there. And I had quite convenient, you'll notice this little building out back here, little outhouse. And so had the facilities and everything right there. And as a matter of fact, I used that outhouse for kind of a center point for my antennas, and they went out from that outhouse, and then brought the coax in through the side cable and their side pipe that was in there for draining. So this was operating with a TS430 here. Later on, a few years later on, in the 2000s, then we had built up a little to-go kit here. I still have this one. I'm still using it on field day. And that's a FT100D down in here. That's a 100-watt rig, 160 through 2 meters. And then have a tuner here, which this was the MFJ. I've since replaced that with a LDG auto tuner, and that works very well, especially for field days, so for tune-up on the antennas there. Now I've got another partner when I do field day. That's my grandson, W0DYD, another one in the sequence here. And I don't know if you ever recognize that call, but it's a call that was owned by who is now W0MBD, Man Bites Dog, he calls it, up at St. Cloud, Minnesota is where he's located. But we set up in a tent outside in his yard there. He has a tech license, so he really appreciates field day because now he can go on 20 meters on sideband and all the other nice frequencies there. And we set up the 2 stations, and we work pretty much simultaneously there. If you're looking at getting into HF, a lot of people say it's expensive, but we set him up here for, it was about 120 bucks. Got him a little FT747 Yaesu, which is a nice little compact rig. It's kind of sitting behind him, so you can't see it on this one. But that got him on the air. I think he bought a power supply for 20 bucks at a Hamfest someplace. So now for about 140 bucks, you're on the air on HF. And so it's possible to do it on a budget. 2022, there's a little better picture of his setup on the right there. Little Sauk is about 10 miles north of Sauk Center. So we set up 2 antennas, 2 GR5Vs at 90 degrees each to each other, so that we try to eliminate as much crossband as we can. We still get a little interference sometimes, depending on which bands we're on. So, but we have a lot of fun with that. 2023 field day, just a couple of years ago, and now we've got another great-grandson in the making here, and he loves to tune the dials and loves ham radio. This year we set up inside his back porch there because it was kind of a rainy weekend and pretty muddy out there in the yard, so we still have the 2 stations set up. Do a little chasing DX. I'm not a real avid DXer, but I've worked about 194 countries with 100 watts from Shakopee, and mainly on CW. But this actually is a mixed award here. So recruiting the next generations. As I said, here's the next generation coming up. And here's a couple more. The 2 that are, one sitting down is my daughter, Cheryl, and then we've got 2 of our great-grandkids here. He's the oldest great-grandkid at about 13, I think he's 12 now, and or 13. And they live up in Brainerd, but they like to come down once a year on spring break and spend it with great-grandpa and grandma down here. So they're scheduled to come down next week, as a matter of fact. But last time they were here, we took them over to the Pavik Museum, and they got kind of inspired about radio. And one of the things that they're doing here is they have a Atwater Kent that has all those dials on the front, and you've got to tune about 3 of those dials in order to get tune in a station. And so they've got a little chart up there that you set this one at 10, this one at 20, and so forth. And so they're tuning in the WCCO there. The other thing that really inspired them, I think, was this setup here that's in the Pavik Museum. And that's 2 stations where you can send Morse code. And then they have the code up here, so you could sit down and send your name in Morse code. And that really enthused them about CW. And so this is a good place if you're trying to recruit some young people to probably get them into amateur radio. So here's some radios from my past. I put it in the form of a little quiz here. I gave you the first one. That's the Helicrafters. That's 41G. How about the upper right there? Pardon? Yeah, it's a Hammerlin. That's the 129X. How about the other one down here in the corner? Who's the manufacturer? Hammerlin, yep. Yeah, there it is now. Hammerlin HQ 145X. This one, they did have a series with different, which looked very close to each other there. How about the upper one here? This is one my dad picked up that we used a little bit at the beginning there. This was the Helicrafters Sky Buddy, it was called, as S21R. How about the lower left here? Anybody recognize that? Manufacturer? That's a Helicrafter. Yep, SX24. And the other one is an SX28 here. So I had both of these in the past years. So here's some of my early transmitters. Upper left here. Anybody ever use one of those? Or yeah, these are the BC series.
BC 348.
Yeah, it's the 457 is on the left, and then the 458 is on the right. And you didn't have to do any modification. They've got a beautiful roller in there that does the tuning on it. And it uses a pair of 1625s or 807s, military equivalents, 1625. And I had the BC 458. I didn't have the other one. I did have the rack to plug it into. And that tuned the 40-meter band. So very stable, very nice output CW signals with those. How about the middle one up the top there? Kit? You got it. VF1, VFO. Was it?
DX.
That's a 40, but the 20 and the 40 looked very similar. Yeah. Yeah. How about the mic? Well, there it is, D104. I still have that one too. Then I built up another Heathkit. That's the Hot Water 100. There was a 100 and a 101, and used that for quite a few years. It was a nice transceiver there, and we had a little trouble on 40 meters neutralizing it, but every other band worked great on it, so I'm still not sure what the problem was there. In about 1979 or so, I bought my first really commercial rig, and anybody recognize that one? We're getting closer now. Pardon? Yeah, it's Kenwood TS. It's a 430. 430. Mm-hmm. So some of the modes of operation operated a lot of CW, and we operated as the net control station for the Minnesota net for quite a few years, or a couple of years anyway, and that was a traffic net which typically ran around 30 words a minute or something like that. So I was up to about 35 just listening to it. I can't write that fast, so just listening to it and like normal conversation. The years has dropped me down to about 20. I can stretch 25 here and there, but 20 is about the limit now. And that was I used the SpeedX bug for that operation. And then I've got the bencher key here. And also I splurged here a couple of years ago, was it? That ARRL had their 100th anniversary, put out this key which they engraved your call letters, and it was serialized. So I think that was around $250 or something like that for. So, but the most beautiful movement, jewel movement there that I've used as far as the key is concerned. Some modes of operation. The past I've covered pretty much on AM 160 to 10, and right now I'm somewhat limited from 20 to 10 meters with the antenna situation where we are in the HOA. I've got a picture of it coming up here, and we'll expand a little bit on the HOA here too. Also on FM, I have an FM card in a TS590, and it's kind of fun when the band 10 meters is open to work through repeaters and directly on FM on 29.6 plus or minus there, plus the other 220 and 440 megs. Sideband. I remember when the switch was being made between AM and single sideband, the hands were just all kind of up in arms that, oh, this isn't going to work at all. And usually people are opposed to change. So whenever anything comes up like that, such as the dropping the code test was another issue that came along, and a lot of the old timers just said that shouldn't be, that shouldn't be dropped. But we've seen the increase in the number of operators, and I think it's served its purpose. And if you want to do CW, do CW. If you want to do something else, okay. It's your choice, and that's the nice thing about ham radio. Also, we are now on 10 through 20 meters from the HOA with the sideband as well. Some of the other modes I've been on, packet on both on HF and VHF, mainly 20 meter packet. I don't have the station set up right now, but still have the equipment. Also PSK 31, JT 65, FD4, FD8, Olivia. I've tried a little bit of Verac. I wasn't too impressed with it at first. Anybody else on Verac? Use Verac? It was kind of just a mailbox drop type of thing, but I understand in the new versions they've made it more like PSK 31, so you're supposed to be able to have a keyboard-to-keyboard conversation with it. Also, just recently, in the last 4 years, got into a digital voice with DMR and also the YSF and D-Star. And several years ago, I was into slow scan TV, and that sat in the background for quite a while, and then I just kind of renewed it here lately, and I've been having some fun with it. So these are some of the pictures from back a few years ago that I have received, and in with the using a program called MMSTV, which is the slow scan TV program. And the picture you see here is one that I received back, and he's sending back the picture that he received from me, so you can see what your signal looks like on the other end. And this is the case down on this one too, from Pensacola. A couple of 73 picture there, and from one on the right from VE3NYZ. Cartoons are quite popular. Again, this is a picture that I took. I like to do a lot of photography, especially bird pictures. This was taken out on Lake Hazeltine. He was up quite a ways carrying a little goldfish that he had stolen out of there. It was an osprey. And so I incorporated that in as one of the pictures that I sent to W0DYD. He really has a booming signal. I think he runs a kilowatt. I'm running about 200 or 300 watts on slow scan TV. A couple other nice pictures that came through there. So we've got some other hams in the family, and one of those was my wife for 1 year. And the story there is we were married in 1958, and in the little town of Quamba, Minnesota. Anybody know where Quamba is? You know where Mora is? Go another 6 miles out on Highway 23, and don't blink here, you'll miss it. And when we were first married, my dad and I guess, kind of hounded her to get a ham license. And so she finally took her license. She got up to 5 words a minute because she had her novice license. But in that time, the novice license expired in 1 year. And she says that was the best day of her life when that license expired. She just did it to prove to us that she could do it. And so she understood about it, and she tolerated it. So she tolerated a lot of things with me. But we were married for 62 years, but she passed away in 2020 now from Alzheimer's and diabetes. She was on about 7 shots of insulin for diabetes, so finally took her. But left me 4 daughters, and one of those daughters became a ham, the youngest one. So the arrow there indicates that. And she applied for her grandpa's call, so she is now a W0DYC. And she's not active on the air at the present time. She's working full time, and she raised a son. He's in his 20s now and gone, but she also doesn't have any equipment right now. And her house burned completely to the ground in those Colorado wildfires that they had out there, 3-4 years ago, something like that. And the fire swept through and wiped out 1,000 plus homes in that area. And so that was quite a devastating loss. They were out of town at the time too, and down in Colorado Springs having a nice birthday celebration. And they came back, and they couldn't even get back to their place. But the Lord blessed them with his mother leaving them a condo. So they moved into the condo, and they had a place to stay, but there was a lot of homeless people out there at that time. And she was formerly KB0CMM, and the other daughters were calling her the Colorado Motor Mouth. So she decided, I guess, to get the other W0DYC call here, which was dunk your cookies. I have a younger brother. He's 15 years younger than I am. He's out in Madison, Minnesota, just on the South Dakota border, and set up a FM radio station for the city there, and has operated that for many years. He just retired last year and sold the station to his, let's see, it'd be his daughter, his son-in-law's sister. So that station is kind of in the family, but if you go over to Pavik Museum, you'll see him in the Broadcaster Hall of Fame. So his picture on the wall, and there is a write up there on him as well. So he's done a lot of things for the city of Madison out there. So he established KLQP FM in Madison, and he and I went to Dayton here last year. It was my first time at Dayton, so had a great time there, and we were kind of overwhelmed with what was going on. But and this year I took a solo flight down to Hamcation in Florida, and we had some good sessions down there. We attended, I think, about 10 of the sessions that were on Friday and Saturday. Wasn't too much going on Sunday, except some Skywarn training, I believe. But I also had to have a little fun while I was down there. And so I stayed with my sister, who lives in Oviedo, just about 30 miles away, and could use her car to go to the venue. And her daughter took us out on a little boat excursion, one of these airboats, and had about 5-6 rows of seats on it. So we saw a lot of alligators down there. As far as how many of you attribute your ham radio career or start to your career that you have now? Anybody has got into the electronics because of your radio background? I was the same way then. That this is probably a little difficult to read up here, but started out, I mentioned working for KNOX and KBMO, did some announcing and engineering for both those stations, and KBMO is in Benson. I was there for about a year, and also did some news writing, local news writing and gathering. So it's, you got kind of all the jobs when you get to a small station like that. Worked for Northwest Airlines for a couple of years as a maintenance mechanic, a radio mechanic, and also calibrating, troubleshooting flight simulators. Quite different from what you have today in flight simulators, and that was all analog computers. So you had a room like this full of banks of servo systems that ran all the controls and everything. So a lot of mechanical repair work there. Went to Honeywell 6 years in quality instrumentation technician, doing a lot of repair on test equipment, and also as a quality engineer. Left for Phillips Test and Measuring Instruments for 11 years as a field service tech, one-man service operation here in Minneapolis, or in Bloomington, actually. Back it up here again. They closed up their Minneapolis service center and sent all the service to Chicago. And so I was out looking for work, opened my own business, Meyer Electronics. My boss was so kind at Phillips that he was a little disturbed that they were closing down Minneapolis. So he said, I'll just write off all of the calibration equipment in the lab for you. And so I took that home, set it up in the basement, and for 3 years was able to keep the wolves away. And we had a built-in base here in the Twin Cities area for servicing, because a lot of Phillips customers were kind of disgruntled that their service had been taken away. So capitalized on that. Then I eventually got in contact with Herb O'Neill, who was out at Hutchinson, which was the technical college at that time, and ended up teaching there for 13 years, went back for an additional year, but taught in the metrology class, calibration. and they had a program which has been discontinued now, but he had a course developed in artificial intelligence technology back in 1985, and compared to what was going on then to compared to what was going, there is no comparison as far as AI is concerned. But I had to prove to the state of Minnesota that I was capable of teaching AI, so we developed a troubleshooting program and presented it to them, and they said they were very interested. They had a couple of people that were working in the AI. It was a lot of branching instead of networking, neural networks and things like that. But then that program got changed over because there weren't really any jobs for artificial intelligence technicians. And so the program was changed over to a computer technology. And so I taught in that program primarily for the remainder of those years. And we brought the program up from about 15 students up to about 106 students in about 3 years there. So that really took off with the networking and repair. Then I retired from there in 2001 and was with J&G Technology, my own consulting company. And I finally retired from that just back here to take care of my wife in 2019. So I figured 83 is a nice age to retire at. So I'll be turning 89 now on the 19th of this month. So here's the present setup at home. And we have several different transmitters, or transceivers here. This is the old TS 930. We've got the ICOM 7300, the TS 590, which I've had since 2012, Meritron 811H. Got an ICOM 207, which is now replaced here with an Anytone D578. That's combination DMR and VHF, UHF. A couple of MFJ power supplies that powers the rest of this stuff. And down here is a little antenna tuner. It's a digital antenna tuner. So I can tune it wherever I want from the HRD software that I'm running up, Ham Radio Deluxe. So enjoy that. So also for logging, using HRD log, and that's tied in directly to EQSL and the logbook of the world, so it automatically uploads the log to those two locations. And it's completely automatic through the WSJTX for FT4 and FT8. So here it tells me that W0DYD is on the air. It tells the frequency here and what the mode is and what I'm using for a transmitter. If I switch transmitters, that'll change here through HRD log. So I worked this guy last night on 20 meters, ZL1BD. That was on FT8 on 20. So you can look at the logbooks. Well, a little collection of the handhelds here. The only purchase I made down at Hamcation is one unit, oops, wrong button, which is the second one in here, I believe. It's a Yaesu FT70DR. That's will operate Yaesu C4 FM as well as 2 and 440. The others, the Baofeng here is a pretty nice little handheld. This is the UV17R. It's much sturdier, much more dependable than the UV5R that has become very popular because of its price. And this is a couple of DMR rigs here, MD390 and a excuse me, D878 Anytone. Here's my antenna on the roof of the HOA. That's a 5-foot tripod, and this is the Cushcraft MA5B. And The vertical one up here, jumping here, this one is mounted vertically. That's one of the elk antennas, which covers 2 and 440. So I've got 2 coaxes running down, one coax for the MA5B, which covers 20 through 10. And this antenna is a 2-element on 20, 15, and 10. And then the center element is actually a rotatable dipole on 12 and 17 on the work bands. But it's all on one coax. So it's easy to run one cable down. And then I had mounted a LDG tuner right at the antenna, but I took a lightning strike on that, and there goes about a $600 unit. So I sent that back to LDG, and they said, well, we'll send you another one. They sent me another one, and that one didn't work. And so I sent that back, and they said, well, they don't make these anymore. And so we'll give you one that tunes at the transmitter. I'm very satisfied with LDG because they offered me an auto type that was cheaper than what this other one was, and I says that's not really fair. And so they sent me the more expensive one. So now I've got a 1,000 watt automatic tuner, and I can run that down to 5 watts and it still works fine. And it's really a nice tuner. It's 5 foot from the top of the roof. Yeah, this is 5 foot from here to here. Mm-hmm.
Did you ask permission or ask?
I did one better. I joined the executive board, so I had a vote. There's 5 members. It's self-governed. It's a small HOA. It's 14 units, and three in a unit, and 4 in most units, but there's 3 in ours. It's the only 3. And so I brought pictures, and I said this just is an overgrown TV antenna, basically. And in the bylaws, it says you can have 1 antenna. And so it was kind of put in there for these dish antennas that people are using for TV. But I had one other gal that was on the board that had a general FCC license. And so she kind of knew what was going on. So I sold it on the basis of emergency communication. If anything went out here, we've got a spot right here that we can help you out on any emergency communication. And I got it in writing and approved. So if you can't fight them, join them. Also, back in 2015, I gave a presentation here. I don't know if you remembered it or not, on ham radio operation with a remote operation. That one's changed quite a bit because of the new rigs and the oncoming of USB. Previously, we were using a little different method, but right now I've got it set up with my TS590 USB connected to a computer and IC 7300, so I can use either one of these and remotely control them from my tablet upstairs, or I can control them from here. Matter of fact, I don't know if we have enough time or not, I could give you a little demo because I've got it running at home. And the way I'm doing that now is to use a desktop program or source. It's called dualmon.com. Very inexpensive, $21 a year. And you can control up to 5 different computers. So I do IT work for our church, so I've got 4 of our church computers on there, so I can remote in and upload stuff to them. But I also squeak in one of my ham radio on that. So we've got that all set up to do that. So it works really good with FT4, FT8, because you don't have to jump around a lot of frequencies, and you can just leave it at one spot. And so the next thing I've got kind of the challenge for you then is to try something new, and for me as well. Build something, write an article, volunteer, Elmer, VEC. I did some work with VEC testing with W5YI group, the Smarts Club, and or you might have some something to share as far as a class. But I wanted to give you a little trivia, and this one is a trivia quiz. Celebrities who are or were hams, and if you've worked any of them. And we'll have the first category here is in musicians and singers. Anybody know any musicians or singers that? Patty Loveless, Chet Atkins, Ronnie Millsap, Jim, is that Croce? And ones with the SK here are no longer with us. And then the last one is Larnell Harris. He's a gospel singer and songwriter. And about 3-4 months ago, I heard this WD4 calling CQ on 20, and I answered him, and it was Larnell Harris. And so we talked a little bit, and then he gave his last name, and I says, yeah, I know who you are because I've got some of your music. My favorite genre is gospel, Southern gospel or gospel music. And matter of fact, my wife and 4 daughters and I gave musical gospel concerts around the area for quite a while. I play piano, so with the I think musicians make good CW operators because they kind of have the rhythm, and it I think comes maybe a little bit easier. Some others, actors and TV personalities. So here's a few others: Marlon Brando. I think all except the last one are SKs here. Hugh Downs, Walter Cronkite mentioned. Arthur Godfrey goes back further. Then you have Tim Allen, Tool Time, Last Man Standing. Astronauts, cosmonauts. Well, there's a whole bunch, yeah. Yeah, a couple that have passed away there. Owen Garriott, Yuri Gagarin, probably better known. British astronaut there, Helen Leroy, and some more. Reed Wiseman, still around. He was in the field day here, exercise. Victor Glover, Hadfield, and there's a whole other list. How about politicians?
Barry Goldwater.
Yep, I worked him way back. A couple others, Gandhi, Prime Minister of India, he's passed away now. Siga, President of Italy. Did we get politicians? Yeah. There's a few more there. Okay, I guess that's it.